My daughter-in-law was filming me while I set the table and she posted it with the caption, "Our live-in maid. At least she's good for something." My son didn't stick up for me. He just hit it with a laughing emoji. I didn't argue. I just left. The next morning, her card got declined at the grocery store. Have you ever felt like an invisible servant in a home you built with your own hard work? Drop a comment below letting me know where you are watching from and what exact time it is for you right now, because I would love to know who is tuning into our community today. I spent the night at a quiet bed and breakfast on the edge of Portland. The room was perfectly still, a stark contrast to the suffocating entitlement that had slowly poisoned my own home. I didn't cry. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. It was a balance sheet that had finally been audited, revealing a massive deficit in respect. For 12 long months, I had been the silent investor in their version of family, but the subscription was officially canceled. Morning arrived with a bright winter sun. The passage of time was marked by the sudden, frantic dancing of my smartphone across the wooden balcony table. It vibrated relentlessly, casting jagged ripples across my morning coffee. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I calmly sliced into a warm croissant and watched the screen light up with Ashley's name over and over again. Then the text messages cascaded in. She was standing at the checkout register of a crowded downtown grocery store, surrounded by a mountain of gourmet items, completely blindsided because the extra debit card in her hand, the one attached to my account with a strict $2,500 monthly limit, had just been flatly declined in front of staring strangers. I set my cup down with absolute deliberation, letting the silence on my end drive the panic on theirs. I didn't answer a single notification. I simply breathed in the crisp Oregon air and let them stew in the disruption of their automated comfort. They weren't shocked by what they had done to me the night before. They were only shocked that I had stopped playing along. To them, my financial compliance was supposed to be permanent infrastructure, as automatic as the electricity running through the walls. They had overdrafted on my compassion for the last time. It was exactly noon when I drove back. The second I unlocked the front door of my Craftsman home, quick, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Ashley stood there, her face deeply flushed with rage, her arms tightly crossed. Tyler hovered just behind her in the doorway, looking exhausted and running a hand through his hair. "What the hell was that this morning?" Ashley snapped, her voice vibrating with a shrill, defensive edge. "I looked like a complete idiot at the register. Did you forget to raise the monthly transaction limit or something?" I didn't flinch. I calmly pulled off my winter gloves, took off my coat, and hung it on a wooden hanger with mathematical precision. Then I turned around, anchored myself in the hallway, and looked her straight in the eye. "No," I said, my voice leveled and entirely devoid of emotion. "I didn't forget a thing. I canceled the card completely." Tyler stepped forward, his eyes darting between us nervously. "Mom, you can't just do that," he muttered. "How are we supposed to shop now?" I turned to him. "With your own money, Tyler. That card was for occasional shared items, not your everyday expenses while you live here rent-free. I'm not carrying that anymore." I held out my hand. "I'd like the card back now." Ashley huffed, dug through her purse, and tossed the plastic card onto the little entry table. "All this drama over one stupid video," she sneered. "It was just a joke for my friends." "It was your idea of a joke," I said matter-of-factly, pocketing the card. "And this is my home. I don't need the jokes, and you don't need my account." I walked past them directly into the kitchen, the silence of the house settling heavily around us. The dining table remained half-dressed, the clean white napkins sitting exactly where Ashley's digital ambush had left them the night before. I did not prepare the usual elaborate Sunday family meal that normally filled this space with savory warmth. Instead, I quietly heated a single bowl of vegetable soup for myself, sat at the small kitchen table, and ate in absolute isolation. Tyler hovered in the archway, his eyes tracking my spoon, waiting for the familiar maternal invitation to join him or explain away the tension. I kept eating in silence, refusing to offer a single word or a glance. When you treat someone like an invisible ghost in your own home, you completely lose the right to share their table. This domestic standstill gave me the precise operational clarity to audit the structural history of our living arrangement. For over 30 years, I had commanded absolute respect as a high school principal, managing hundreds of unpredictable teenagers and resolving complex institutional crises with clinical precision. When my son, Tyler, came to me a year ago, claiming he was drowning under the economic pressure of his corporate financial analyst job, I opened my doors out of raw, maternal love. The agreement was supposed to be simple, a rent-free year in my upper floor bedrooms so they could completely insulate their salaries and build a bulletproof safety net for a home down payment. I wanted to give my son a solid financial foundation, not a permanent cushion for lifestyle inflation. Instead, my maternal instinct walked me straight into a toxic structural trap. While I quietly paid the heavy property taxes on this historic craftsman house entirely alone, Tyler and Ashley redirected their newly freed capital into a performative display of personal wealth. They signed up for high-end boutique gym memberships, flaunted luxury wardrobe hauls on their digital feeds, and bought endless aesthetic props to showcase an artificial standard of living on social media. My retirement rapidly became their uncredited operational asset. I carried their heavy laundry baskets to the basement, scrubbed their pots, and kept my mouth shut just to preserve a hollow illusion of family harmony. That was my critical error. The precise moment I fell deeply into the cruelty normalization trap. When you provide an overabundance of grace without enforcing strict operational metrics, you do not breed gratitude. You breed absolute entitlement. Ashley and Tyler didn't look at my daily labor and think about my sacrifice. They had spent 12 long months normalizing my kindness until it morphed into basic, expected household infrastructure. To them, I was no longer a human benefactor or a mother who had rightfully earned her rest. I was just an automated utility, like the water running from the kitchen faucet or the electricity powering their screens. Nobody pauses to thank the tap when it flows, but they will violently rattle the handle when the supply is suddenly cut off. Well, the main valve was officially closed, and the accounting had finally begun. The house transitioned into an uneasy, calculated Cold War over the next 48 hours. I completely scaled down my daily operations, stripping away every automated luxury they had extracted from my lifespan for free. I cooked only for myself, loaded only my own single plate into the dishwasher, and wiped down only the exact surfaces I utilized. I stopped making their morning coffee. Their overflowing laundry basket sat completely untouched in the upper hallway, and I walked past it with a strange, clinical detachment. I was no longer the silent utility company powering their lives for free, and the immediate vacuum of my services left them entirely disoriented. The boiling point arrived on Wednesday morning. Tyler stepped into the kitchen doorway, holding a deeply wrinkled blue dress shirt, his jaw tight with frustration. "Mom," he said, his voice laced with an aggressive, defensive edge, "you haven't run the laundry yet. I have a critical review meeting with the senior corporate partners this afternoon, and I absolutely need this shirt." I slowly turned a page of my newspaper, took a slow sip of my black tea, and looked up with a completely unbothered expression. "Your laundry basket is exactly where you left it in the upper hall, Tyler," I said evenly. "The basement washing machine is empty. You know exactly how the dials work." He blinked, his face twisting into deep, childish frustration. "But you always handle the laundry cycles on Wednesdays for all of us," he muttered. "Ashley doesn't have time for the basement today. She has her mandatory boutique workout class at 1 o'clock and then a strict digital deadline for her content." I set my teacup down onto the counter, the sharp, solid click cutting off his excuse with absolute finality. "I am a retired high school principal, Tyler," I said, keeping my tone strictly clinical. "I am not your outsourced domestic concierge. If your wife has 60 minutes to invest in her personal fitness, she has 20 minutes to run a load of whites. And if she doesn't, you do." He let out a loud sigh, muttered a hostile complaint under his breath, and stomped down the basement stairs. As I listened to the heavy, angry thuds of his boots hitting the wooden steps, a profound realization washed over me. For 12 long months, I had been bound tightly by the invisible chains of maternal guilt. Every single time I picked up their messes or funded their comfort, a quiet, conditioned voice inside my head whispered that a good mother must endlessly sacrifice her own peace to ease her children's path. It is a psychological trap, an emotional script designed to transform parental love into automated enabling under the toxic guise of family loyalty. But watching my adult son stomp downstairs to wash his own clothes, those chains didn't grip my throat anymore. They shattered entirely. This wasn't a failure of compassion. It was a recovery of basic sanity. Breaking the cycle of systemic dependency meant forcing an adult to finally feel the baseline gravity of his own responsibilities. Later that afternoon, Ashley marched through the kitchen, ignoring my presence entirely, and slammed the front door on her way out. But her hostility didn't remain offline. Within an hour, She launched a weaponized, passive-aggressive smear campaign across her digital platforms. She uploaded heavily filtered, cryptic stories to her lifestyle feed, typing long blocks of text about the hidden cruelty of narcissistic older family members who actively try to stifle young couples trying to thrive under economic pressure. I sat in my comfortable wingback chair, watching her screen glow with manufactured victimhood. They truly believed their public performances could bully me back into compliance. They were deeply mistaken. The silent standoff in the hallways didn't slow my momentum. It redirected it into a systematic, professional reclamation of my physical property. For 12 long months, the historic detached carriage house garage at the back of my property had been completely hijacked. It was packed from floor to ceiling with Ashley's discarded clothing inventory, plastic clothing racks, and mountains of unused e-commerce shipping boxes. She had promised to sort through the hoard within weeks of moving in, but that day never came. Instead, my own vehicle had been forced to sit out on the asphalt, pelted by the relentless Portland rain for months while her commercial clutter stayed dry. I put on sturdy boots, wheeled out a small garden cart, and began reclaiming my space box by box, rack by rack. I didn't dump her property on the curb. That would have been a clumsy emotional reaction. Instead, I spent 3 uninterrupted hours under the gray sky, neatly stacking every single container and garment crate under the large covered carport in the backyard. It remained protected from the elements, but it was officially stripped from my interior space. When the carriage house floor was entirely swept clean, I backed my car into the center of the garage. The soft, mechanical click of the automatic door sealing shut sounded exactly like a victory hymn. I slipped the keys into my pocket, feeling the tangible weight of territory restored. My next operational move targeted the main house. I called a local commercial locksmith, paying him in full with cash to install heavy-duty, premium-keyed lock sets on both my master bedroom door and my private home office door. Lately, Ashley had normalized walking into my rooms as if they were public property, hunting for wrapping paper, borrowing my expensive cosmetics, or simply dropping items she didn't want to carry upstairs. My personal privacy had completely vanished under the weight of their unchecked entitlement. When the locksmith handed me 2 fresh sets of keys, I immediately locked the office and slid the metal deep into my cardigan pocket. Around 4 in the afternoon, Ashley shuffled down the hallway, her arms full of digital camera equipment. I stood relaxed by the kitchen counter as I heard her attempt to twist the handle of my home office door. She rattled it once, paused in confusion, and then jerked the handle with violent, frustrated force. "Is this door broken or something?" She shouted down the corridor, her voice snapping the silence. I stepped out, leaning casually against the kitchen doorframe. "No, it's not broken," I said, my voice entirely flat and measured. "It's locked." She spun around, her eyes widening with genuine offense. "Locked? Why would you lock it? This is ridiculous. We're family. What exactly are you hiding in there anyway?" I looked at her completely unbothered by her performative outrage. "My peace and quiet," I replied. "Your designated area is entirely upstairs. From this point forward, keep your lifestyle props and digital gear in your own rooms. My space is no longer an uncredited public storage facility." She opened her mouth to argue, realized my expression was a wall of stone, and stomped up the stairs. The weekend passed with Tyler stubbornly moving their towers of storage boxes from the carport into a rented storage unit under the cover of night, leaving a heavy, resentful fog in his wake. But my mind was already moving far beyond the physical parameters of this house. On Monday morning, I sat at the mahogany desk inside my newly fortified home office, opening my laptop to conduct a complete digital audit of the canceled grocery account. I had spent decades balancing tight public high school budgets, tracking every stray penny with absolute operational skepticism. When I pulled up the detailed transaction history for that $2,500 monthly debit card, my eyes locked onto a pattern that had absolutely nothing to do with shared household meals or family groceries. It was a systematic, covert hijacking of my retirement funds. Ashley hadn't merely been buying expensive organic food. She had quietly saved that supplementary debit card as the primary automated payment method for her personal influencer business entity. There, hidden beneath what I thought were routine grocery runs, were heavy recurring charges for high-ticket social media ad placement campaigns, premium video editing software suites, and monthly subscription fees for global content engagement metrics. My compassion had been a luxury resource they had aggressively overdrafted behind my back. She had deliberately built her commercial platform on the quiet, uncredited drainage of my lifespan, confident I would never verify the metrics. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. It was documented exploitation. Because I had frozen the card without warning, the automated billing cycle hit an absolute wall. At precisely 9 a.m, a massive recurring transaction failed to clear, instantly triggering the automatic cancellation of Ashley's largest corporate brand sponsorship collaboration. The campaign went completely dark before it even launched, shattering her digital contracts in seconds. By 6 that evening, the front door rattled violently. Ashley exploded into the hallway, her face deeply stained with tears, her voice completely unhinged. Tyler trailed behind her, his eyes wide with a mixture of panic and defensive anger. "You ruined my life!" Ashley screamed, marching toward my office door while I calmly stepped out into the hall. "You intentionally destroyed my biggest contract. My sponsor completely pulled their funding because the web hosting subscription failed this morning. Do you have any idea what you've done to my career?" Tyler stepped forward, trying to summon a protective authority he didn't possess. "Mom, this went too far," he said, his voice shaking. "This is her livelihood. You can't just sabotage her business because your feelings were hurt over a social media caption." I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice to match their hysterical pitch. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out the printed bank statements, and placed them flat on the kitchen counter with absolute, lethal precision. "This wasn't a family argument, it was an accounting. Look at the data, Tyler," I said, my voice cutting through the panic like dry ice. "Your wife didn't build an independent career. She siphoned my retirement funds through the card allowance I graciously handed her. She exploited me. She stole from me." The conversation ended right there. The shield of their perfect, manufactured image was completely destroyed, and there was absolutely no path to redemption left. Driven by raw desperation to reclaim dominance over my household, Ashley orchestrated an unannounced weekend ambush. On Friday evening, the heavy slam of car doors outside broke the quiet rhythm of my living room. I looked through the window to see her parents, Gary and Teresa, marching up the driveway with 2 small rolling suitcases. Ashley threw the front door open with a plastic, performative smile, while Tyler stood rigidly beside her, looking deeply uneasy. Nobody had requested authorization. Ashley led her parents straight into the downstairs corridor, her voice dripping with artificial warmth as she announced that the guest suite was right this way. I remained completely still as she marched them down the hall. Ashley reached out, confidently twisting the handle. The lock didn't yield. She tried again, forcefully rattling the premium keyed lock set I had installed just days prior. The physical boundary held perfectly. She spun around, her pleasant facade instantly evaporating into a sharp look. "Did you lock this door?" she demanded. I stood up with calculated grace, stepping forward to greet her parents with clinical politeness. "Good evening, Gary. Good evening, Teresa. I hope your drive into Portland was smooth." Then, I turned my gaze back to my daughter-in-law. "Yes, it is locked," I said smoothly. "You should have asked me ahead of time, Ashley. The guest room isn't available anymore. I locked and repurposed the space, converting it into my private craft sanctuary." "Open the door," Ashley hissed, dropping her voice. "My parents are staying the whole weekend. Where are they supposed to sleep?" I looked at her, my heart rate entirely steady, completely detached from her manufactured crisis. "If you invite guests, you need to host them within your own space," I replied. "You have that big living area upstairs with a pull-out couch. I'm sure they'll sleep just fine there." Tyler's face flamed with absolute humiliation. Without a single word, he picked up the suitcases and began the slow, defeated march upstairs. Gary and Teresa followed him in stunned silence, with Ashley trailing behind. The downstairs area was completely mine again. But the ultimate finisher was executed the following morning. At precisely 9 o'clock, I called Tyler into my private office. He sat across from my desk, looking hollow-eyed and entirely depleted. I didn't offer an emotional lecture. Instead, I simply pulled a legally binding, formal lodger agreement from a drawer and slid it across the polished mahogany wood. "This is your new operational framework, Tyler," I stated calmly. "Since this is an owner-occupied primary residence and you have paid 0 rent, you legally qualify as lodgers, not tenants." This agreement requires $2,200 a month, plus exactly 65% of all household utilities to reflect your two-thirds occupancy and commercial usage. It goes into effect in 30 days. If you sign, I will accept you under this strict transactional status. If you do not sign, this document serves as your official 90-day legal notice to vacate, entirely exempt from local tenant relocation penalties. Tyler stared at the contract like it was poison, realizing I was no longer playing a game. He gave a tiny, silent nod. 3 months passed in transactional, distant interactions, culminating in a cold winter morning when the final box left my house. Tyler and Ashley didn't secure a luxury beach house. Instead, reality hit them, forcing them into a cramped apartment on the opposite side of Portland. On moving day, Tyler handed me the keys with a quiet nod, his eyes avoiding mine. The heavy front door sealed shut, and for the first time in a year, my Craftsman home belonged entirely to me. The hallway no longer smelled of ungrateful tension. It smelled of fresh coffee and the lavender soap I had chosen for myself. The following morning, I carried my breakfast to my vintage wingback chair by the window and sat down. Bright morning sunlight poured across the clean hardwood floors. There were no rogue sneakers blocking the entryway, no commercial waste, and absolutely nobody expecting me to have lunch on the table by 1 o'clock. Leaning back, a long forgotten lightness filled my chest. I wasn't an uncredited live-in maid. I was finally just me, standing firmly within my own sovereignty. Watching their world shrink exposed the illusion of borrowed sovereignty. Ashley's digital arrogance and Tyler's corporate stability were completely hollow constructs. They were merely renting their status from my silent, automatic sacrifices. The moment I introduced strict transactionality, forcing them to pay $2,200 a month and carry their own weight, their artificial house of cards collapsed. They didn't lose their comfort because I was cruel. They lost it because they had zero internal substance to sustain it without draining my lifespan for free. I've come to realize that cutting off toxic family ties isn't a betrayal of love. It is the ultimate recovery of your own dignity. Blood is not a blank check to overdraft your peace of mind. For a long time, I let maternal guilt convince me that boundary lines were a form of hostility. But if you find yourself in a similar situation, constantly making yourself smaller so that entitled people can shine brighter, remember that your compassion is a premium luxury, not an automated utility. You do not owe anyone your silence, and you certainly do not owe them a free stage to mock your kindness. If you are listening to this right now, feeling overlooked or disrespected in a space you built with your own hard work, let this be your official notice. Stop begging for respect from people who only value you when they need your infrastructure. Go buy the commercial locks. Cancel the shared accounts. Slide the contract across the table. Forgiveness isn't always about repairing a broken bridge. Sometimes it is about locking your door and setting your own spirit completely free. If this journey reminded you that your kindness is a privilege, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with one person who needs the courage to lock their door today. Drop your thoughts below. I read every single comment.